Let's do it!
Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, brought to you by WeirDKingdom.com, a growing movement to help inspire, empower, and unite women in their careers and in their lives. I'm your host, April Seifert. Each week, I get to interview some of the most inspiring women, and I'm bringing those interviews to you. Let's get to it.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this week. I have such an exciting interview to bring you this week. I'm so pumped about it. If you've ever wanted to pack up and move to a foreign country and try that out, this is definitely the interview for you. Cami Dodge-Lamm was born and raised in Watford City, North Dakota, tiny little town. She attended North Dakota State University in Fargo, where she earned a BA in political science in 2003. That same year, she and her husband moved to Washington, D.C., where Cami proceeded to work for Senator Byron Dorgan of North Dakota, the British Embassy, and as a consultant to the U.S. Department of Energy. During that time, she also earned a Master's of Public Policy degree from George Mason University. She currently lives in Vienna, Austria with her husband and 2 children, and they're building a home in Vienna's 22nd district. During her free time, Cami enjoys spending time with her family and, of course, taking in the outdoors and Vienna's amazing cultural activities. Welcome, Cami.
Thank you for having me, April.
So I gave everybody a little bit of an intro about you and talked a little bit about your bio, sort of the official version, but in your own words, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in a small town in western North Dakota, in Watford City, North Dakota. Upon graduation from high school, I attended North Dakota State University in Fargo. Following that, I moved out to Washington, D.C. with my new husband, Michael Lamm, and we went to Washington, D.C. and proceeded to live there for about 11 years. While in Washington, D.C., I worked for various very prestigious institutions, among of which I served the people of North Dakota by working for Senator Dorgan on Capitol Hill. I worked for the British Embassy, and finally, I worked as a contractor to the U.S. Department of Energy. All of those things were just incredible learning experiences, and I just am so grateful for all the opportunities that they afforded me and the perspective that I now have of not just Washington, but now that I live here in Vienna, Austria, that is. There's a Vienna, Virginia, too. Yeah, Vienna, Austria. I think it's just given me a really amazing perspective on how the most powerful city one of the most powerful cities in the world operates, but then also how the world views the U.S. too.
Tell me a little bit more about that. So I can imagine that being as somebody who watches the news and follows happenings in D.C., as they hit, I guess, the national news and that type of thing, you develop sort of an outsider's view of what it's like to live in that city and work in that city. But as somebody who was there for over a decade, what was that like?
You really gain a sense of the level of passion that people bring to Washington. I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who, at least when they initially come to DC, that they come riding in thinking, I'm here to make a lot of money. That's not why people go to D.C. They go to D.C. to really work in an area that they're passionate about, whether that's, no matter what that issue is. I think that's one of the big reasons people go there, and that they want to serve the people who they're representing. I think one thing that people, don't always really realize is how much energy the city really does have. I know when I watch movies about the way DC is portrayed, I always kind of laugh because it's always like these, backroom deals and that kind of thing. And I mean, deals are struck and what have you, but it's not quite. At least I never saw that DC. That's as shady as people might think it is.
That's really comforting. That's actually really great to hear.
I think a lot of it's really overplayed, but it just kind of goes back to the reason why people are there, and they're there to represent the people who they work for. One thing that I always loved about DC was, the passion that people brought. And it wasn't just the workers, but the feds and the people who worked on Capitol Hill and the White House and the contractors, everyone that makes that city run. But also the people who come and just visit the city. They're so excited to be at the nation's capital and, really see it up close. And, between the tourists and the protesters and just it's just such a unique place. It's such a unique place to be. One thing I don't think people realize is that it's actually a really cool city, especially for, younger people. It's got an awesome nightlife. The restaurants are great. It's such a vibrant kind of city. And I know it's not popular to stick up for Washington, D.C., but I'm going to do it anyways. I think it's the level of intelligence that people bring to their work is amazing. It's not uncommon to find someone who has, a law degree and a PhD, or they're an engineer and they have a law degree or something like that. I mean, that's the caliber of people who work there. But I think that's also what really, one of the things that I took away from it was, because everyone is so intelligent, everyone is bringing their A game, and there's a lot of type A personalities that the city draws. And so you really have to kind of prove yourself. It's a really good training ground for professionals, I think, because you have to know what you're doing.
That's a really interesting point, actually. I want to go a little bit into that, because one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people, and actually that's one of the catalysts that got me excited to start to put these podcast interviews together, are that a lot of times we as women, for better or worse, we see a situation like that where everyone is extremely intelligent and they're doing such a great job, and we look at it from the outside and it can almost feel like you are an imposter and you shouldn't be there, or you don't deserve to be there, or somehow you're not as smart or as talented as the other people in the room. Did you ever feel that yourself personally, or ever run into that with other people you worked with? Excuse me. And then, how did you kind of work through that, if you did?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I dealt with that. Like I said, everyone's bringing their A game. Everyone's bringing the passion for the issue that they're advocating for. And I guess one thing that I typically turn to, and I didn't necessarily, I didn't always ask for a mentor or, specifically, but I would look to the other women in the room. I really tried to model, as best as I could, model myself after them and really kind of ride their coattails, I guess, and just remind myself that, if they can do it, then I can do it too. So that's why I do think it's incredibly important for women to just be in the room and be that role model for each other, whether it's a younger staffer or, a peer of the same age. It's incredibly important that women just be in the room and be there to support each other, whether you realize you're doing that or not. Someone might be looking up to you. So it's an incredibly important thing to do, I think.
1,000% agree. And when I'm starting to pull themes out, I guess, from some of these interviews, I've done a number of them now, and the importance of having a tribe around you and the importance of having people who truly support your success is something that has come out numerous times from people who have such different backgrounds. It's just so important, exactly as you said, for us to be there for one another, to support one another. That may mean giving really honest, critical feedback. That might mean a pep talk. I'm not sure, but it's so important for us to be there for one another and to try to support each other's success. I think it matters more than any of us ever could realize.
Yeah, I mean, that really makes me think of, I had this really amazing manager at Energetics. And, when she came, I had been on the team and she was new to the team, and she was all of a sudden our new manager. So I was nervous. I wanted to do a good job for her. And at one point, she finally just said to me, I trust you, Cami. I trust you to do a good job, and I know you'll do it. And that's all she had to say. And I was like, and it's like, it just clicked, like, okay, yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing a fine job, and I can do this. I can, serve the company and serve the program that we're working on. And yes, I am good at my job. So, and from then on, she was amazing to work with. And I just became a much more confident person just from those few words that she said. So never underestimate that.
I love that so much. And it ties back to something that you said just a few minutes ago about maybe that just means that you are more of a mentor for somebody who's newer in their career or someone who's more junior to you within the company. I think another common thing for us, and oh my gosh, did I feel this when I was trying to decide whether to launch this podcast at all. I was thinking, who am I to do this? I don't know anything about this. I don't have anything to share. I don't know what I'm doing. But in the end, it's like, no, I feel like I have some things that I could share that might not help every woman, but it might help some. And if I'm interviewing other women, they might have lessons and thoughts and ideas and experiences that would really benefit other women. And so I'm trying to create this crazy tribe, sort of virtually through this podcast, but to do exactly that, to try to, inspire and motivate people that it is totally possible to do these big things with your career and with your life, whatever that happens to mean for you individually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, and it doesn't, and don't get me wrong, my mentors and my pep talks certainly haven't only come from women either. Some of my best mentors have been men too.
Absolutely.
And there was one, this just makes me think of, I had a professor, and I wasn't particularly close with him or anything like that. But it was one of my last classes in graduate school. And we were working on our research projects throughout the whole semester. And my research project was about climate change being a push factor for human migration. It was a migration class, a human migration class. And at the time, that topic was very new. It wasn't very well researched. There were some news articles on it, but there wasn't a lot of hard data out there on it. And I was really nervous that I would get a lot of pushback from my other classmates, that people would scoff at it and that it just wouldn't be very well received. And so I was really I was a little shy in my presentation. I did the presentation, but I didn't give a lot of, I didn't really express what I thought about it. I just simply presented the data and what other people were saying. And then kind of gave my own little comment at the end, but I didn't really get into it. And at the end, my professor said, Cami, you clearly know what you're talking about. You should act like it.
Wow.
I was like, I mean, like, he wasn't mean about it. He was, he wasn't trying to be mean about it. But I was like, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about.
I do know.
I should be more confident. I mean, he was a little more nuanced than that. It was a little more softer than that, but that's basically what I took from that. And from this day on now, I remind myself of that if I'm walking into a client meeting or, if I'm talking about a certain subject, I just remind myself, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. And you know why? Because I research it and I do my homework and I know what I'm talking about.
During our initial chat, when we were chatting before we, officially began this interview, you had mentioned that you moved to DC initially without knowing where you were going to be working. You didn't have a job landed yet.
Right.
What was it that
made you do that and gave you the confidence to be able to go? Because I think that's something that a lot of people would have at least some degree of pause about. How do I go to this new city that's fairly expensive and big when I don't have a job?
I wanted to work in DC, period. I had an internship there before, and I fell in love with everything about it, and I knew I wanted to be there. I didn't know if I wanted to be there my whole life, but I knew I wanted to have the opportunity to work there at least for, a while. I wanted to be there so badly, I was willing to do anything to be a part of it. And so I worked retail for a few months, and then I landed a job at a consulting company where I did work with, I did some projects with the EPA, with the Environmental Protection Agency. And then I landed the job with Senator Dorgan's office, that's also where I had my internship too. So I kind of had an in there, and they knew I was eyeing a job on Capitol Hill. So when something came up, they gave me a call, and I accepted, and things just kind of snowballed from there.
And so you've made another jump more recently. You touched on it a little bit, but we haven't talked about it very much. You recently moved, well, not super recently, but within the past handful of years, moved out of the country. Tell us a little bit about that move in your life.
Right. So my husband is originally from Vienna, Austria. We met while I was in undergrad. While I studied abroad for a year in Sweden during my undergrad, and that's where I met him. And so, he moved to the U.S. and of course, moving back to Vienna was always something that maybe not. It just kind of depended on the year that you were asking us if we would ever want to move there. But we did finally decide to make the jump to Vienna. One of the big reasons that Michael and I decided that we wanted to move to Austria was to make our kids bilingual, to give them the opportunity to be bilingual. Here, German is the native language, and so to truly immerse them in both English and German is just a tremendous opportunity that we just felt like we could. It was just an amazing gift we could give our then one child, but we now have two. Not that you can't raise bilingual kids in the U.S. You can do that, obviously. However, I just felt like their skill level would be just greatly increased if they actually grew up with it from the start. It's just amazing to see my daughter go back and forth just with no problem. She'll look at my husband's dad, her grandfather, and she'll be speaking German, and then she'll look back at me and speak English and just go back and forth, no problem at all. And she's 4. I mean, it's amazing to see. I just feel like it's going to prepare her for adult life and give her and our son more options, hopefully more career options down the road, since they speak more than one language. Maybe they'll pick up a third. We'll see. But yeah, that was a big reason why we decided to move here too. I like Vienna a lot. Just walking around the city, it just has such beautiful architecture. There's so many parks here. It's a very green kind of city. Lots of bicycle paths, and it's very clean. It's safe. It's got a good school system. It's a good place to bring a family. I knew that there were going to be challenges, but ultimately I felt like we both felt like in the long run, this was going to be a good place for us to be.
That's really cool. And so when I think about other people, there's probably a number of people who have thought about living in another country. Maybe they've gone somewhere on a trip and really, really loved the place that they went, or they've thought about going somewhere and have just really been curious about it. And I'm going to get super practical for a second with the next set of questions that I ask you. Because I think some of those really practical things are things that end up being barriers for people, even mentally, to just go there and really think about what it might be like to make a move like this, even if it's something they really want to do. How did you guys decide on Vienna because that's where Michael was from, or did you consider a number of different places?
Part of it was that we wanted to be closer to family. We considered Sweden. That's where we met. We considered Norway. We considered Colorado, and we considered, North Dakota too. And I guess with what we wanted to give our kids and be around ourselves, Vienna was ultimately the best fit for us.
Now, I think it would be easy for people to say, oh, your husband's from there, so maybe that made it easy to go there. But you weren't from there, and you individually had to, adjust to going to a new place. So what was it like for you personally to adjust to just cultural differences and just everyday, day-to-day differences that people run into when they're in a different country?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing I try to remind myself is, yes, Vienna is different from any city in the U.S., but it's not that different. It's like people will say like, oh, isn't it so different over there? And I say, no, a Thai fishing village would be different. That would be very different. Vienna's not, it's a modern Western European country. But with that, there are, the longer you stay here, you realize like all the small cultural norms that you have to get used to that are very different from the U.S. Just learning to watch out for those bike lanes and remembering to watch out for tram lines. Stuff that you're just simply not used to. The first year is what's difficult, I think. Just trying to acclimate yourself to all the small things, like where do I go to buy Tylenol? Oh, I can't buy it at the cosmetic shop down the street. I have to go to an actual pharmacy. I have to, that just like relearning everything. I had to learn a completely new transit system. I had the DC Metro map imprinted in my brain, and now not only did I have to learn a new public transit system, but everything was in German. And so hearing German all the time was really just mentally very tiring. I was very exhausted at the end of the day for about the first year, just trying to process German all the time. It's gotten easier now over time, but, and then on top of that, we got here, and about 3 months later, I got pregnant. And so, navigating the hospital system, luckily, I have incredible support from Michael and his family. And if I ever had questions or needed help with anything, they were always there to support me. So, it was fine. I delivered a baby in a foreign country. It went fine. The hospital staff was great. It was, nothing too different from the U.S. It was all, very nice modern hospital facilities. I was well taken care of.
You mentioned German a little bit. Did you speak German when you went there, or did you learn it after you got there, or are you learning? Where's the language situation at?
I'm still learning German. It definitely behooves you to learn it if you're going to be here for the long term, especially if you want to work like I do. Or work outside the home. If you want to work outside the home, it definitely helps if you speak at least some German. I don't have it down pat. I'm still learning it. I did have to learn some German before I came. Before I came here, I took some language courses in Washington, D.C., and passed the A11 exam, which is the most basic of all basic German tests.
Yes.
But I had to pass the test if I wanted to work here.
Got it.
And so it was still like there was so much pressure to pass the test that I was really freaking out about it. Now I look back on it, I'm like, what was I so nervous about? That German is so easy, but at the time it wasn't. It was a very daunting thing, but you work through it. It was okay.
So you mentioned your work. How did you find a job when you moved?
So when I first moved here, I had the incredible fortune of being able to still work for my old company and with my old team back in the States. I just essentially telecommuted for about a year and a half after I moved here. With that, I had to set up a company here. I did not plan on setting up my own business when I moved here. It was something where if I wanted to subcontract for my old company, the government of Austria made me set up. They made me do it. But it actually ended up, and I kind of grumbled about it. I wanted to just, freelance and just kind of do something more casual than setting up an official business. But it actually ended up really being a blessing in disguise. When the work was finished with my old company, I all of a sudden didn't have any work to do, and I was really down in the dumps about it. I'm someone who's always prided themselves on my professional career, and then to all of a sudden not have any work was really a very humbling experience. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, well, I can sit here and mope about not having work, or I can try to figure out some options. And so I, proceeded to try to figure out to just create my own options. And so with that, I started doing two things. I started networking, and I signed up for another graduate program.
Nice.
So the networking, it just, there was a company that I knew of that made solar panels. I went out and talked to that guy. My background is actually in energy policy. So, through some contacts, I, reached out to this guy, and then he put me in touch with another guy. He gave me some work to do, and then that guy referred me to another guy. It's like how you build a client base. You just get reference from one person to another. So now I've been working, my latest project has been working for a company called Search Inc. You can find them at searchinc.com. It's a really innovative technology company that specializes in handwritten text recognition technology. It's a bit of a mouthful, but basically what they would do is make handwriting searchable. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to work with them. I've been doing some business development and market research for them, some communications work. And so I've really been able to apply my skill set in a new way, which has been so interesting for me. I think it's when you walk into a situation like coming to a new city and, you're trying to find a different path for your career, it's important to be flexible. So it's just been great to be able to use my skill set, but in a different way.
That's huge. I think one piece that I've heard, again, from a number of people that I've interviewed is the importance of being exactly what you said, being flexible, but then also being open to have a career path, and maybe not necessarily a straight path. It might be a very windy path, and maybe it'll take you into some areas that you don't know absolutely everything about. But I think it's important for all of us to give ourselves credit that we have skills that can be applied in a variety of ways. And it sounds like you've been really open and really able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, if you would have told me 2 years ago that I would be working with the IT industry, I would have laughed at you. I was like, no way will I be doing that. But now I am. But so it's just been a great opportunity to work with them and just like you said, use your skill set in a new way.
Tell me a little bit more about your master's program.
The Master's of Science in Renewable Energy Systems at the Technical University here in Vienna. When I was first looking at the program, I was kind of going through this career rut or transformation. was trying to figure out my next steps, basically.
Transformation sounds so much more positive than rut. I love it. I'm using that from now on. I'm not in a rut. I'm not slowing down here. This is the transformation. Maybe it's the beginning of it, but it's a transformation. I love it.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I just wanted to, I talked a bit about, my independent consulting that I've been doing here in Vienna. It's just kind of getting going now, but I wanted to create options for myself. So I decided to do that. But then a friend of mine had also told me about this Master of Science program, and I thought, I'll look into it. We'll see. And it looked like an interesting program. It kind of is based on 3 different pillars. There's a technical portion where you review basic physical. I'm not describing this very well. Let me start over. There's a technical component, a business component, and a policy and law component. Now I've got I felt like I have the policy and law component down, but the technical and business side is definitely something that I could improve on. And, I reviewed the list of past lecturers, and I was really impressed with the breadth of specialties that they brought to the classroom. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to create this second path and see what happens, because I really saw it as possibly a gateway to career opportunities. A lot of it is quite new for me since we're still in a lot of the technical and business aspects of the course. But to me, that's good. It's great to feel challenged, and I think that it'll provide a lot of good opportunities. And, I wanted to prove to myself that I could succeed in those fields, but then also I wanted to really be an example to other women and young girls. I didn't want to just be following other women anymore. I wanted to, start to carve out my own niche and be hopefully someone who another, woman or young girl looks up to.
I love both of those reasons, because I love that you're recognizing the fact that you are doing something groundbreaking, or maybe not groundbreaking, but you're doing something that not a lot of women are doing right now, and that you see that, and you see that there, I guess, comes a little responsibility with that that falls, on your plate to show yourself as an example and participate in things like this, where you get to talk about what you're doing, so that other women who might be thinking about doing something, maybe it's in the energy space, maybe it's something else that feels like there's not a perfect path carved yet. I just think it's cool that you're willing to share your story and be an example, and you recognize that you are one. And also, I think it's really neat that you're in a position where you're open and you're scanning the horizon for other paths and other opportunities. Lots of times, I think it's easy to get into, well, this is my career and this is my skill set and this is what I do, almost as though it's an identity. I'm in this industry, but the fact of the matter is your skill sets are so much more applicable, and you're so much more able to contribute in a wider variety of fields than you'd possibly ever imagine. And it's really cool that you're keeping your options open and you're pushing really hard in a new direction. I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I've thought about, it seems like, no job is safe. And so why not take the risk? Why not, challenge yourself to do something a little different? I mean, if anything, I think, the recession in 2008, 2009, one thing it showed me is that no job is truly safe. People who had jobs when, for 20 years, and that is what they do, that is their identity, were laid off. And so, I mean, you need to be able to, look at yourself and say, what is my skill set? I'm not I'm not just my job title, I'm a whole set of skills. To push yourself to really find something new in you or a new way to apply your set of skills is really important, and it's very empowering.
So as you look back on your career, earlier on in the interview, you talked about being there and being able to be a mentor for people who are maybe not as far down the path as you are, and in whatever way that means. Maybe they're new to their career, or maybe they're new to the company or new to a particular area. As you look back on your own career, what advice do you have for other women?
Well, I mean, specifically about moving, even if it's not moving to another country, I've actually had a few friends who, they were some friends from DC, and they were looking to move. I had one friend who had always wanted to live in California, and I had another friend who had always wanted to live in Colorado. I had a colleague who had always wanted to move to New Mexico. And I was always continuously one of the few people, I think, that would tell them to just do it. Mm-hmm. These were smart, capable women. I said, if you don't have a job, you'll figure something out. When you get there, you'll figure it out. You want to plan and have, some finances in hand, to cushion you along the way, or, plan on picking up just whatever you can to pay the bills along the way, but you'll figure it out. You'll figure out a career. And today they are all, doing fine. They have successful jobs. They have friends. They have great lives, and they don't regret their move for a second. So if a move is really what you want to do, figure out how to do it, and then and do it. Maybe that sounds crazy to some people, but if you want to move, I think you should just do it.
Well, it goes back to, I'm going to pause you really second. Really for 1 second. It goes back to when I asked you about moving to DC without a job. Your answer was so simple. It was, I wanted to work in DC, and I suppose you have to live in DC to work there. So you should move there.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy, but it is maybe that simple, that you do need to be in the right place in order to, live the place that you want to live.
To really, realize your dreams of, being successful in the place you want to be in. I think your environment is everything. So you can't, I've heard so many people say oh, I wish I could go live in France, or I wish I could go live in Florida or whatever. And I'm just well, then do it. If you really want it, then do it. Because if you just sit there and wish that you could do it, then you must not really want to do it if you're not making plans to do it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I obviously understand too that not everyone can just pick up their bags and go. You need to plan. It may not happen. You may not be able to do it when you want to do it, but there's nothing stopping you from making it a goal and taking steps to figure out how to achieve that. It's okay to experiment with different things. You don't have to say okay, if you say, okay, I want to be a writer, but then if your career path takes you down something else and you're not a writer at the end of the day, that's okay. Your career can take quirky detours like mine did. And, I think that's okay. I think that's what makes life interesting. That's always been a big goal of mine, is to have an interesting life, not happy or have money. I've always wanted to live an interesting life, and I think I'm achieving that so far. Be brave. I said earlier, my background is actually in energy policy, and the energy field is often very male dominated. And so, you had to be brave walking into a room and, just having the confidence that, you know what you're talking about, and, and finding those other women to support you. Network as much as you can in your own way. You don't have to, gather as many, I would say you don't have to gather as many business cards as you possibly can. What I would encourage people to do is to try to find, if you're at a networking event or, something like that, to try to find, try to get, 2 or 3 really key people out of the event to, or even if it's just one person, whatever, just try to keep the numbers small, but of high quality. I was actually listening once to this interview with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I don't remember the interview was very long. I don't remember everything they said, but there was a point in the interview where they said, and I'm not quoting them verbatim, I'm paraphrasing. They said, it's so hard to let go of the way that you're doing things and the way your current way of thinking. It can be so hard to let that go. And it's not until a blank canvas is really forced on you that forces you to let go of those old ways of thinking and those old ways of doing things. And it's actually very freeing. It's a very freeing feeling to have that blank canvas to work with and to start new again.
I love that so much.
Yeah. I never thought I would quote the Red Hot Chili Peppers on the internet. But
in an inspirational podcast interview, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You never know where these things are going to go. Speaking of music, I have one final question for you.
Yeah.
So I ask every single person that I interview the same final question, and I am compiling a Spotify Power playlist that is curated by songs that are ones that are motivational to the women that I interview on this podcast. So I have to ask for your contribution and what your favorite motivational song is.
I would say, well, can I say 2?
You absolutely can.
Two songs. One would be The Walker by Fitz and the Tantrums.
Nice.
And the next one is Shake It Out by Florence and the Machine.
I love it.
I love both those songs. I think they're really motivating and inspiring kind of songs. The Walker is just kind of like, I don't care what, it just reminds me, don't listen to other people, do what you think is right, and you'll succeed. And Shake It Out is just a reminder to really let go of the things that are bringing you down, because that's not what's going to give you energy at the end of the day.
Beautiful. That's perfect. Yeah. Well, Cami, I can't thank you enough for being open and willing to do this, to sharing your story, and to, sharing with us the lessons that you've learned along the way. This has been really great. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Cami Dodge-Lamm, currently of Vienna, Austria. As I was editing her episode, I couldn't help but think about the goals that I have for myself that I'm not taking seriously. I think a lot of us might be in that situation. So instead of putting together takeaways and reflections on Cami's podcast, I'm issuing a challenge. Actually, I'm issuing 3 challenges. You can do 1, you can do all 3. I don't care. There are no rules here. Number 1, network. Don't groan, don't whine. Seriously, network. It's so important. And if you need help, I put together a recent blog post on something I'm calling authentic networking, and you can find it at www.careerkindling.com. It's on the blog. 2, pick a goal, a stinking big one, and then pick one thing that you can do today to get yourself closer to achieving it. You don't have to know what your next step is after that. Just do one thing today to get yourself a little bit closer. And last but not least, number 3, find a way to mentor another woman. You have so many gifts and lessons and skills to share, and I promise that there's a woman around you who would benefit from them. If you want to know more about Cami, head over to www.careerkindling.com and search for Do It to bring up Cami's show notes page. While you're there, sign up to join our community and we'll give you immediate access to our Spotify Power playlist, including Cami's songs The Walker and Shake It Out. We'd also love to hear from you, so head over to iTunes and leave us a rating or a review. And if you liked what you heard, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, have an inspired week.